Good morning and welcome to our webinar. Our webinar today from the Dairy Modernization Initiative is on milkhouse design, layout, construction, and biosecurity considerations. My name is Cynthia Miltenburg. I'm a veterinarian and I work for the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. And it's my pleasure to be part of this project for the Dairy Modernization Initiative and my job to host our webinar today with our two speakers from the Dairy Farmers of Ontario, Guy Séguin and Emily McDonald. Before we get into our actionable webinar, I'd like to introduce my colleague Tom Wright, who is going to give us just a little bit of an introduction to the larger Dairy Modernization Initiative.
Thanks, Cynthia. Yeah, as Cynthia mentioned, I'm Tom Wright, Dairy Cattle Specialist with the Ministry. Dairy Modernization, if you haven't heard about this before, it's a cross-cutting industry project. Our aim is to provide practical information to dairy farmers who are considering modernization, and that could be retrofitting an existing facility or building a new facility. We'd like to acknowledge and thank OMAFA and Dairy Farmers of Ontario for the financial support for this project. It was awarded to Professor Derek Haley at the Ontario Veterinary College. And I'd also like to acknowledge the in-kind support we get from the Saputo Dairy Care Program at the University of Guelph as well. This is our fourth webinar. You can find our previous ones at our website, dairymodernization.ca, and we also have them on our YouTube channel. Our goal is to provide producers with information to help them navigate the process of modernization. And our goal, along with this, is to deliver usable, unbiased information in many different formats, while trying to avoid information overload, because we know that that can be a real thing when you're going through a process as complicated as modernization. We have a steering committee that we're very grateful to get their advice on this project for as well. So we'd like to thank their contribution to our project. The commitment they bring in terms of knowledge and time has been very valuable to us in developing these resources, and we appreciate their support throughout this project. So we're sharing their logos as part of this presentation just to acknowledge the support they bring to the project as well. With that, look forward to the webinar, and I'll turn it back over to Cynthia.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate you sharing that information with us. So I have the privilege of introducing our speakers this morning. Our first speaker will be Emily McDonald. Emily is the Manager of Field Services and Raw Milk Quality Programs at Dairy Farmers of Ontario. Since joining DFO in 2013 as a field service representative, she has worked closely with Ontario dairy producers and now leads the field services team and provincial raw milk quality initiatives. Emily oversees programs that are focused on milk quality, regulatory compliance, and producer support, working with field staff to ensure consistent implementation of industry standards across the province. Emily holds a degree in animal science from the University of Saskatchewan and previously worked with Alberta Milk, where she managed animal health, research, and provincial disease management initiatives. Raised on a dairy farm in southwestern Ontario, she remains actively involved in the industry as a 4-H dairy club leader and continues to lend a hand on her family farm whenever she can. Also joining me today is Guy Séguin. He is the Senior Advisor, Special Programs at Dairy Farmers Ontario. Since 2002, Guy has worked on many programs at Dairy Farmers Ontario and Dairy Farmers of Canada, including udder health management, milk quality, the time temperature recorders, and the introduction and implementation of ProAction, among other things. He also worked for De Laval for 10 years and introduced the voluntary milking system in North America. Guy holds a degree in agricultural engineering from the University of Guelph, and he is also a professional engineer. So with that, I will turn it over to Emily to share her slides.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Cynthia. Thank you for that nice introduction. And thank you to the Dairy Modernization Committee for asking Guy and I to present today. We are happy to be here. So just jumping right into things. So a little bit of the foundation of our presentation and what we're going to talk about today and why a new milk house matters. So milk quality, food safety, farm efficiency, and regulatory compliance are the pillars of a thriving Ontario dairy operation. So your goal in modernizing your dairy facility is a functional, durable, and fully compliant milk house built to last to the next decades and beyond. So the focus for today is to navigate some of the Ontario regulation, the design codes, essential measurements, and key functionalities from planning to approval stages. So if we just look at the overview from our presentation today, I'll cover some DFO policies, quota and raw milk quality, and some regulations that you should be aware of. And then we'll switch over to Guy, who will look at some of the OMAFA and regulatory issues, some equipment considerations, and also biosecurity. So one little note or disclaimer that I did want to just preface my presentation with is just that the things that we will review today are all policies and regulations that are in effect today. However, these things can change. Policies get updated, regulations also can change, although not as quickly. So these are just make sure that, you know, when the time comes that you're considering to update your facility, make sure you look at the most current policies and regulations. So just know that, you know, we're going over things that are in effect today. However, these may change, you know, in months or years down the road. So it's important to check all the current policies on DFO's website. So very quickly, I was just going to talk about Quota. So Quota is owned by the Dairy Farmers of Ontario and is allotted to licensed dairy producers. So it's very important to keep your quota ownership information up to date, especially when ownership changes occur. And DFO only recognizes registered quota owners. Private or third-party agreements are not recognized by the DFO. So first off, we'll talk about renovations of current facilities. So if a production facility is unable to be used during construction, producers can apply for something called shared facilities. And so prior to the start of using shared facilities, producers must provide a signed contract with a contractor, show proof that a minimum of 10% deposit's been made, or if the producer is doing the renovation him or herself, they must show proof of ordering materials and proof of a shipping date and also a project timeline. So shared facilities, so that's when, yeah, like I said, you can no longer use your facility to ship the milk. So you have an option to send your cows and quota to another facility to be milked. So this is again for producers renovating your current facility. It can be used for up to 6 months. Again, extensions can be given and they follow a fee schedule. You can use up to 5 host farms. So, you know, you can up to 5 farms that can fill your quota. So you don't have to, you know, if I'm milking 100 cows, I don't have to find one farm that can take all 100 of my cows. I can split those up to 5 different farms. So this requires, in order to be approved for shared facilities use, you have to submit the engineered stamp building plans and give a start date. You must retain ownership of the cows and the milk that is shipped from the farms. And a farm inspection must be completed at your renovated facility before those cows can come back and before milk can be shipped. Sometimes, instead of renovating an existing facility, we decide to move locations. So this is also allowed. You're allowed to relocate your primary dairy facility. You must keep in mind you must reside within 20 kilometers of the primary dairy facility. And again, it's important that you contact DFO, FSR early when planning this relocation, just to discuss the policies that exist around that. So getting into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of some of the renovation requirements. So the first is the farm bulk tank. So the bulk tank must be accessible using the 25-foot milk house on the milk truck. And we'll get into a little bit more of those requirements a little bit later. Tanks that are 3,700 liters or 1,000 US gallons require a minimum 3-inch outlet and valve. And all new tanks must be equipped with DFO approved center pin butterfly valves and a tri-clamp or Acme nut connection. It's also very important to have your bulk tank calibrated by DFO. We do have 2 calibration units that travel across the province calibrating bulk tanks for producers. So if you have put in a new bulk tank in your facility, in your renovation, it's very important to have that calibrated before shipping, obviously just to make sure that what we're shipping is what we're getting paid for. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about milk transportation policies. So first off, very important that we're keeping our farmyards and lanes clean and free of manure, and also snow and ice in the wintertime. There's no livestock to be permitted in the milk truck loading area. Milk trucks must not back into or out of farmyards or lanes from the road. And we have to provide a safe truck turnaround as close to the milk house as possible. So just a few diagrams, and these come right out of the policy book. So again, if you want to have a little better look at these and really look into the measurements, these are all on the DFO website in our policy booklet. But this one would be an example of a circular turnaround. Again, the truck's just able to turn all the way around right in front of the milk house. This is an example of a 3-point turnaround. So yeah, obviously pulling in, backing up, and then pulling out again, and then they sort of back right up to the milk house. So that would be the 3-point turnaround. Again, in the policy book, you'll be able to look at these measurements specifically a little bit better, and they may take, you can look for more than the 10 seconds I'm giving you here to look at this slide. So if we talk about lane entrance, this is where the truck's coming in off the road. So it's a minimum of 50 feet wide, right where your laneway would meet the road. It's important to taper that entrance. So it has to be tapered back to 12 feet wide within 70 feet off the road. And again, I think I have a better diagram of that on my next slide. Provide adequate turning space for the milk and transport trucks without crossing into oncoming traffic. And then if there is a culvert involved, the culvert length should be designed based on the ditch location. So yes, so as I was saying, so the 50 feet is here. This is the road going into your lane, and then you're able to taper back here at 70 feet. It has to be at least 12 feet wide. This is just an example of good construction of a well-drained and well-designed laneway. So we remove all of the topsoil. There's 15 centimeters of B or non-crushed gravel, and then on top of that, there'd be another 15 centimeters of A or crushed gravel. And again, it's pretty rare that we need a lane bridge, but it has happened, and so there's some specific information in here, and of course it would all be constructed with an engineer stamp plan, and that goes for a culvert as well if required. So again, for the lane, it's important to elevate the lane to promote proper drainage, crown the lane with a gentle slope from the center to each side, maintain shoulder slopes at no greater than 45-degree angle, and design for winter conditions. So this allows for wind to carry snow off the laneway, ideally. And just, a picture of exactly what we're talking about, a nice, wide, well-drained, lots of gravel, and not even a pothole. So this is a very nice laneway here. So okay, a few other specifics. If we talk about overhead objects, so beautiful laneways with trees all the way down on both sides. Certainly beautiful to look at, but sometimes we get issues with the trees growing over and the trucks, scraping the trucks on the way by. So it is important that we're maintaining an overhead clearance of 15 feet above the traveled portion of the yard and the lane. So remove or trim overhead branches, wires, or other things that can become obstructions. And then accounting for snow and ice buildup when ensuring that clearance as well. Milkhouse overhang clearance. So lots of new milk houses, renovated facilities have beautiful entryways and almost like porches to their milk house. But it's just very important to remember that we also need a milk truck to be able to still access our milk. So important that the minimum clearance is 15 feet tall. So any overhang must be at least 15 feet so the truck can still get backed up to where it needs to. The milk truck must be able to stop 6 feet from the milk house wall to allow pump compartment access while still reaching the tank outlet. And remember, I talked about earlier using that 25-foot hose. So we only have a hose that's so long. And if I can't get close enough to the milk house because of the overhang, then we're not going to be able to pick up the milk. The underside of that overhang must be finished to prevent birds or animals from roosting or nesting. And then roofs sloping towards the loading area or the hose port. It's important that we include avalanche stops there, obviously to prevent snow and ice buildup from falling to the loading area. We talk about milk house orientation. So again, hose alignment, the bulk tank outlet valve and the milk house hose port must be positioned so the hose connects in a straight line, so without any bends or changes in direction. And bulk tank access, so adequate space is maintained between the bulk tank outlet valve and the milk house wall to allow the BTMG to perform duties safely and effectively. There's nothing worse than having to squeeze into to spaces to try to, work and get the hose connected and move around the bulk tank. So, just those types of things that you're thinking about when we're thinking about renovating or modernizing our facility. And then visibility requirements. So it's very important that the BTMG, your bulk tank milk reader, can view the truck while it's pumping, just to make sure that everything's working and for safety and things like that. So that they can see from inside the milk house that the truck is working properly and the milk is being unloaded or loaded. So yeah, this is just showing a nice finished walls and smooth floor in the milk house. And it's important that none of these walls are porous. The milk house does get to be quite wet and humid with temperatures and washing and things like that. So easy to clean is important here. And then this picture again, just showing the drain in the milk house and the floors are draining properly and yeah. So with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Guy, and I'll stop sharing, Guy, so you can.
Thank you, Emily. I'm just gonna. How come that's not working? Okay, they're working. Yes, perfect. Thank you. So thanks everybody, and thank you for the introduction. I'll just keep going. So up to now, Emily talked quite a little bit about the DFO policy. But really, there's other regulations and approvals that normally need to be done. And some of the references that I'm going to refer to is a little bit of everything. But certainly, the Milk Act and the Regulation 761 is really what what defines and legislate the process. And it's you'll see there it's quite precise what we're actually requiring a milk house and the functionality of it. And we talked about the DFO quota and raw milk quality policies. There's also the National Dairy Code, which gives a very good, suggests very good provincial standards, and they're up to date, which means that sometimes they even are going to show what to do in the future, but sometimes the provincial regulations haven't quite been there yet. So this is also a good reference to see what's coming up. All milk house and parlor construction plans must be submitted and certainly looked at by a DFO, the program, the field service representative, and it should be looked before construction begins. And of course, you will need, and this is not with us, but with OMAFA and some of the permits that you'll need to build, and that's required for any new construction. So consult your the local municipality and your nutrient management strategy specialist. Start early. Some of these approval can take a long time. I'm talking sometimes over a year. When we're talking about, some of the design, we just put a few numbers, but we always still want that milk. This is the whole purpose of having the storage, or the milk house is to store milk and to store in the proper functional matter, free of insects, free of everything, and, a good smell because we really want outside air in there, not inside air. And so we want milk to be stored at 1 and 4 degrees Celsius. We Ideally, we'd like to put a tank that can do 3 days of a bulk tank capacity. And this is a good rule of thumb because we'll accept 3 day old milk, especially in the winter with the road closures. When we're talking about floor drain slopes, we're thinking of 2 and 4%, and we want wash charts done before starting any new system so that everything is cleaning and everything is up to grade A conditions. I put in also a compressed air system if that's going to be used. Then this is important to be done by specialists. And finally, like we said before, you'll need your approvals. So for the OMAFA, the Regulation 761, they do require for Milkhouse to be free from insects. It's only used to for cooling and storing milk. The idea of having vacuum pumps in your milk house like we used to and having an oily floor, this is no longer acceptable. Really, they should be done in an equipment room. And so where the milk pickup is should be a very clean, sanitary, good floor, nothing oily, and in great conditions. And it should be maintained to impede the bulk tank milk grader in the performance of his or her duties. So it's important that there's no smell, and there's enough space too for the truck driver or the bulk tank milk grader to go on top of the bulk tank and to properly grade the milk when the smell, etc., and to also, of course, take a sample. And lighting, of course, is also very important. A producer may have to form bulk tanks, as was mentioned by Emily, under certain conditions. You need good drainage, you need clear space, like I just said, but also for washing, cleaning, rinsing, and storing milk equipment and utensils. And you need to have a floor capable of supporting the cooling and storing facilities. So the bulk tank itself, having a few legs, usually a retaining wall and a foundation is needed to put in at the right places. The measurements can be gotten from the equipment dealers. This is well known, even used tanks, but it's very important to have the proper foundations because any cracking of concrete or weaving would not be acceptable at all. And we also need a floor with smooth surfaces that's impervious to liquids and that doesn't crack. Every milk house then should have an adequate slope. If you have to have more than one drain, that's fine, but they need to be P-trapped to avoid odors coming from the drains back into the milk house, and they have to be at least a 60 centimeter from the outlet of each bulk tank. And again, that's to prevent some of the smell going back or vermine going back right in the outlet. Again, lighted providely, and then you need to have doors to the outside, and you have the door opening in the milk house where it's be solid and tight fitting. That's fine, but you also need to see the truck at all times from the milk house, and you need to have a self-closing door. That's so that the doors are always kept closed. We don't want little animals there at all. And then we have roof and walls to prevent condensations. In the building code, a milk house is considered a wet environment, so all plugs and all control boxes should be rated accordingly. Again, we should be properly ventilated with outside air. We need to have a sink with 2 compartments. You need to have hot water and cold water. that's potable and under adequate pressure and enough flow. And you need to have a hose to rinse each bulk tank. That's a requirement. And then to have a port that will be big enough for a 3-inch hose. The wash water, there's some considerations. If you're not sending it to the lagoon, you can put a septic system, but again, this needs to get permits and the proper constructions. And if you're going to do that, and then you also have to be aware of the minimum distance considerations and the municipality issues with farm entrance. Depending where you are, this might be, only certain municipality or counties will be allowed to do the work, and that takes time. And it can be, depending on the municipalities, a lengthy process. I do have some examples of things to do and what not to do. This would be an example of things of not to do, perhaps, because, in this case may be okay in the winter, but you're basically recirculating the hot air right inside the milk house or the equipment room and heating it up. And so we're sort of defeating the purpose. So at all times, and you'll see more pictures of this, but I really like to see these condensing units outside whenever possible. The outlet has to be accessible and it has to be in a safe way. Then, the water cannot get in the bulk tank. And so the protection of the outlet is an important consideration. And the drains have to be 30 centimeters, yes, away from the outlet, so the drain, so again to prevent odor. So what a lot of producers now do is basically a raceway right to the drain. If you do have clean out of place materials, such as those utensils underneath the washer, it has to be clean in the sink. So normally there's a sink that needs to be put in with hot and cold water and soap for the bulk tank mill grader to wash his hands, or to anybody, even technicians that are working around the bulk tank, to have access to water and soap and paper to dry your hands, and then also to have a brush and clean out of place utensils. You can bulkhead your bulk tank. I wanted to mention this. And so in this case here, you would put the agitator would be outside, the breather would be inside, but the agitator could be outside. And the manufacturer sells some of these units to be done that way, and so that no water or outside water or rain could get into the bulk tank. And so there's some specific equipment that you need to buy if you want to do that, but it's allowed. Again, condensing units to be outside is a good practice, in my opinion, and it's easy access. This here is done quite a bit in southwestern Ontario, and where this would be inside, and then there's the levers that allow outside air to come in. I really don't like it because you need to protect where the levers are in the window. You need to have a screen, and having a screen really restrict outside air. And so to do this, then you get a lot of recirculation of the air inside the milk house. And in my opinion, this is a poor design. So a much better design would be the very old Mueller drawing that we had here. I think it's from the 70s or the 80s, where you would put your condensing unit in the doghouse. And if you look in the drawing there between 1 and 2, during the summer, it goes right through, because these would be open in the summer. And so no hot air would go in the milk house where you don't want it. But in the winter, then you could could block the opening for 1 and 2 and open 3 and 4, and then you get a recirculation if you wanted to, and heat up your milk house if that's what you want. You don't need to, but if you wanted to keep a little bit of heat for good reasons. The only thing I'll mention is please don't put that wall so close to the bulk tank in this drawing. But other than that, this is a good principle. Again, the drains, we talked about the drains, the portholes, that it's self-closing is important. And the loading area. Loading area is a big issue. We want this to be basically free of dirt, of manure. And so we really want that hose to be clean because when it gets to the processing plant, we want it very clean, and this is important. So the loading area is a big consideration. Sometimes people put concrete around or pavement, and that's fine. But it needs to be clean and kept clean and free of contamination. Let's not forget the 20 amp outside plug, which would have been mentioned, and then the inside switch to be able to control. I don't know, you cannot really see it very well here, but this is an example of an avalanche stop that for to prevent ice as you're going inside the door. So the hose is needed for the bulk tank milk grader to rinse tank. A lot of dealers now do it right on top of the bulk tank to have a short hose. That's very practical to do, and it works very well. I really want, like, this is one of something that we need to improve, I think, in the province is to really make sure that we follow the plumbing code, the building code, and to have air gaps for drains so that there's absolutely no way that we can siphoning back into the system. This is a big issue with robots, and we need to really make effort. And so here's an example where there's a funnel that's accepting the drains water, and so it's really kept clean, and it's easy and it's simple, but it's very effective. This is another example. This is what we don't want to see, because if the pipe, the black ABS pipe would be full, then there's always a possibility that contaminants or vermine can go right back into the milking system. And then the other thing too is I've been involved in the case where milk was being leaked because some of the valves weren't working properly, or the control wasn't working properly, and something like 300 to 500 liters every 2 days was basically gone into this. This is a buffer tank, and so it would be gone and then lost, and then this cost a lot of money for everyone. And so when you do have an air gap and you see something leaking, there's a lot of good things to say about it because you see that something is very wrong. But when you have it like this, it's poor design. Same thing here, it's poor design. You really do want that air gap. Again, pipelines and concretes, not acceptable. This, that's not acceptable. So this would not be, this had to be redone. So when we do talk about plumbing, P-traps to try to prevent odors coming from sewer systems is important. And then for the the water quality and the supply, consider the 1-inch hose. So to get enough supply of potable water, do complete analysis of water flow, volume, quality. Speak to equipment dealers. Hot water, you should really looking at 80 degrees Celsius. We'll talk a little more about this. And robots, I would consider having UV light or water treatment, because when we stop with the rinse, if that water is not potable, and if there's contamination in that water, it will definitely go in the milk. And so in particularly in robots, it'd be advisable to have a water treatment system for bacteria. Hot water options. You see on the wall there's those small units for hot water. those, in my opinion, this is a preference. The one good thing is they don't take a lot of space, but they don't work as well, in my opinion. When you need the water, you need a lot of water all at once, and this can be a very restrictive to the flow. Now, there do exist some boilers, industrial boilers, and that's a different options, and those are very good. They can be pricey, but don't underspend for the hot water. You need a lot of hot water, particularly for robots, and you need a lot of reserve. It can be built towards it, but yes, do plan for storage and space for hot water tanks. Milk storage, again, you can have one or two tanks. Um, Piping and water pressure and heating, we talked about this, but put some room to do this. This here has some heating floor as well. And then there's a water softener here in this case. So these are important considerations. And certainly if you don't think about it now, but think about it the future, then this can require quite a bit of space. So this is something important to design or to think of. And then if you are putting a buffer tank, please put access. And so here's an example with a ladder that can go and see inside. I mean, sure, you can bring a ladder, but if it's not convenient, this is not going to get done. And buffer tanks, for some reasons, or one place for contamination, they don't always get washed all the time. So, something easy to check, just like the bulk tank is really something that should be considered. Chemical storage. I always have that story about, that we need to have a secure storage. I mean, in my career, I've had at least one producer that lost an eye because of the handling of pure acid. We've had a number of bulk tank mill graders over the years that ended up in the hospital by mixing chemicals. Normally they don't, but I've seen this through my career, and I've also had when I was working for De Laval, there was somebody that wasn't even using the chemicals of De Laval, and I was working for De Laval, and took a cup, gave it to the younger brother, and there's serious health issues for the rest of that young one's life. Happened. And so let's not underestimate. These are extremely strong chemicals, and when they get mixed together, they're lethal. So let's take a step back, maybe have a way to close those, and so that everyone's safe. This is an example of a silo. That too, I wanted to mention. We have a few installations here in Ontario and more across Quebec and Canada. There's some important considerations, and we're not going to go through it, but it's in the regulations and in DFO policies. If you want to take a silo, then the grading is a little different, and so you should be aware of it, and that should be part of your decision making. And in this case here, there's a ladder. If you can see at the left there, this is, you basically have to go, on the ladder 20 feet up in the air to read. But, the dealer here locally was able to put in a camera system where the measurement can go up and down, and the measurement can be done right from the ground using a camera system and a very ingenious calibration and camera that goes up and down. Again, yeah, chemical storage. These are different examples. And this is the one that if you're going to have something that you can do manually, at least put a stop or something that's kids free if kids are around. Again, different size storage. So I'm getting to the end, but I did want to talk about biosecurity on your dairy farm. The whole idea of pro-actions and the biosecurity plans that are getting developed, and in the HPAI and in the Salmonella Dublin, we do have some serious issues when it's on farm. So biosecurity is all about managing the risk, and you're really focusing on preventing practices. And so as you're designing your farm and as you're designing your laneways and as you're designing the flow of traffic, this is pretty important. So, um, and so the idea then is basically on the picture on the right here, where you sort of have the old type of fortress where you'd have a wall around you, and if you ever into a biosecurity mode, that wall would be what protects, diseases from coming in. And if you're unlucky and you have a certain disease in, and you're the one that in trouble, then at least it's keeping it within the walls. And so, that's the red line, for example, on the left side, where you're restricting where the milk truck is going to go. That's going every second day. And you have to think about like what the pork producers are doing, the poultry producers are doing, where there's a red line, and you're very strict about the people crossing it in terms of preparations to go to the biosecurity zone. And so here's another example, an overview where you see in the green there on the right, it's a little bit hard to see, but that's where the milk truck is. And this, they try to make it simple, easy to clean, easy to trying to keep everything else at bay. And really, the milk truck is the only one that's doing that little U shape on the left, and it's the only one allowed to basically use this. Anybody else with feed, et cetera, unless they or manure spreader would have to use a different laneway. And so this is good practice. This is the time to talk about it as you're designing this and to try to alert. And if I had to stop, then I can really stop traffic. If I was very concerned about a foot and mouth disease, et cetera, then I can restrict the traffic to my farm very, very quickly. Again, this is another considerations. I took this from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. There are more sophisticated courses there on this, and obviously, I'm not. You could spend hours on this, but today I just wanted to make you aware of this. And then, of course, trying to avoid diseases coming in and having some different devices, washing boots, et cetera, is a good way of doing this. For human safety, you may have to have some stations, depending how many employees you have. But again, this is good practice to think about it and to have some very specific areas. Maybe not in the milk house, but close to the milk house. It's usually a good place. And then same thing with all your material and safety data sheets and reference materials. Again, the equipment room adjacent to the milk house is probably a better place. In regulations, there is sections on the time temperature recorders, and so you need one, at least one for your bulk tank and system. So talk to your field service representative. Medicine cabinet's the same idea, and of course an office if you'd like. Most of these were taken from the different resources that's available to you, whether it's a Pro Actions that you can actually download right from the internet, or the Biosecurity for Canadian Dairy Farm from Ag Canada that was written about 10 years ago. They're not easy to read, but they're good resources. And of course, anything with the DFO quota and raw milk quality policies. So these were my references today, and I want to thank the Dairy Modernization team to have allowed us to do this, and I'd like to thank my colleague Emily was gracious enough to do this with me, and we'll be ready to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guy and Emily. We had lots of good information presented there. Really appreciate you starting with the laneway, walking us right through the milk house and design, and tons of good information. You mentioned, contact DFO early, they need to see plans before construction begins. Can you just elaborate a little bit, like when should a producer make DFO aware about those renovation and construction plans? And maybe to follow that as part of that, like what kind of role could the DFO FSR play to really support a producer who's in the position of a renovation or a new build?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thanks, Cynthia. Yeah, so there's really no defined deadline, like you must submit your plan X number of days before you start, sort of thing. However, that being said, the earlier that you can involve your FSR and DFO, the better. And that's for multiple reasons, but I'll start off by saying, the worst case scenario, your FSR visits to do an inspection and they don't know that you've done any renovation and they see all kinds of things that are now out of policy or out of regs. So then we have to make changes. So that would be, I'll say, pretty catastrophic. We really wouldn't want that to happen. That would be worst case scenario. So if we're involving FSRs early on, so each FSR covers about 250 to 300 farms in their area. So in that, there's multiple farms and multiple things that they've seen in their experience. So they get the advantage of saying, hey, this guy tried this and this worked really well and this didn't. And that relationship building between FSR and producer is very helpful. I think they're definitely a great resource that producers could use to get a little bit of that experience and knowledge from the FSRs. There would be a requirement to submit the drawings if they're looking to get shared facilities. So if you're doing a renovation and your facility is no longer able to be used, you would have to apply for that. And that would be at least a month ahead of when you are looking to start the renovation and needing the shared facilities, because it takes a month for that to be reviewed. So at minimum, there would be at least that you would let DFO know a month before you were starting to do anything, and that would be submitting the plans, the 10% that I talked about earlier, and the contract, that kind of thing. So that would all be, like, again, minimum that it's submitted to DFO a month ahead of time. But the sooner and the more conversations that you can have with the FSR, the more they're able to highlight the different policies and regulations that you may not be aware of when you are doing that new that renovation or modernization. So
Thank you.
mhm.
That's really good information. Um, in that kind of same vein of, because we know FSRs have a role, they do visit lots of farms and see, lots of examples of what's working well for other producers. Do you have any, examples of features, maybe Guy or Emily, that producers frequently maybe wish that they had included, like after construction is complete? You went through a lot of different features, and I'm just reminded of an example when I was speaking to your colleague and friend Betty Ann, where she mentioned a facility that, afterwards it was like, this would have made way more sense to have a drain additionally here, and probably, had consulting a few people someone would have suggested that in advance. So any thoughts on something like that?
Well, I think, um, I think that sometimes the space requirement seems to be on the small side for some of the new installations. So really take a time to put everything and then look for the future. Yeah, I think that would be my advice. Overall, like some of the new milk houses and some of the construction contractors, what they've done are extremely well done, like for the most part. But you really wanna not. I think to yeah, you don't want to underestimate the space requirement.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only thing that I would add, I think, and when it's a significant investment, obviously. Modernizing your facility is something that A, costs a lot of money, and B, takes a lot of time. So one thing that we always recommend as well is to get out and see other farms. So what have other people done? What works well? And honestly, lots of time, what do you wish that you had changed, like producer to producer, right? And yeah, not everyone's open to that, but lots of people are. And so if you can get out and learn from others, and then you're not, kind of making the same mistake, or maybe it's something you hadn't considered. It's just, yeah, using all of those resources and being able to learn. And because again, you're likely to not do it again. I don't think farms go through, multiple modernizations. It's really something that you plan to do maybe once or twice in your career as a producer, because it is such an expense, that you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way and properly, and you've thought of all the things. So that would be my advice.
Guy, you mentioned, with the, speaking about biosecurity and, often maybe the milk house or the entrance to that part of the dairy barn where the milk house is located might be integrated with other functions, offices, receiving visitors, et cetera. So, how can milk house layouts reduce the risk of disease transmission between visitors, your service providers, livestock areas, or rather maybe directing those to another entrance? Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think restricting, for example, the milk truck coming in is, once a day or twice, once every 2 days. I think really designing it for that, you just to be used by basically milk trucks is really important, and to have maybe a side entrance for everybody else, where if there was a red zone, this would be the red zone that they would get. Perhaps even if I was building a milk house, something I guess I should have mentioned, but showers, because I think we're going to go towards, unfortunately, how the poultry and the pork producers are doing this, as if we're getting any more of those disease coming in. So as we'd be planning it, and it's not, we see this now with lockers, with the large farms, and they'll have showers, et cetera, et cetera. So just to design to basically keep the entrance and the laneway strictly for bulk tank milk graders.
Thank you so much. Yes, and we have a note there in the chat about Danish entries. And if you aren't familiar with what a Danish entry is, that's a bench kind of where you sit and drop your feet and footwear on one side and flip your legs over to the other side, where you then put on the farm's footwear and clothing, so that you are changing and not bringing in diseases or potentially pathogens that were on footwear from another facility. Oh, we have a hand raised there. So Eric, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I have a question. As farms are getting bigger, bulk tanks are getting bigger. Those milk graders always have to go up the steps. Like it's sometimes 4 or 5 steps up to take a sample and to look at the milk. There is systems in place in other countries where you don't have to do that. There is a risk, and the risk is getting bigger as farms get bigger, that they fall off. I mean, sometimes they have a dipper in their hand, a sample bottle, and a straw, and they have to go up and down those steps. And if you would go to meters on milk trucks and automatic sampling, you can eliminate that risk of injury. And it would make the life of the milk trucker a lot easier, because they're all complaining about shoulder injuries from dragging that hose around. I mean, there's better options. You can put reels on the milk trucks. I think there's a lot of room for improvement on the other end of the milk hose. Just wonder how you guys think about it.
I'm just gonna say, and I don't know, actually, it's a good question about some of the other countries, how they do this, but the grading of milk is a real essential part of picking up milk, and it's probably one of the most important duty in protecting the public that the bulk tank milk grader does. And so, the idea of going on top of the tank, whether we measure it with a stick or we're taking a sample or not, or whether it's measured at the truck, I don't think that's going to eliminate the grading of milk. I'm not sure that that we would be open to this. You know that for silos, I didn't mention this, but now I will, is if you're going to put a silo and we cannot grade milk the usual way, then the producer is responsible if the truck gets rejected at the plant for the whole truck, even if it's not just his milk, his or her milk. So um, I'm not sure that at the moment that even though we would go to measurements, automatic measuring and automatic sampling, that we would eliminate the the grading on top of the bulk tank with the manhole. I will say, I'm glad you bring that up though. There is security and safety issues if your bulk tank is getting to be a certain height, and then harnesses would have to be provided. The law is very clear on that. Thank you.
I would just like to add that, like wherever they use silos in different parts of the world, they all just have a little valve at the bottom where they can take a sample. They put it in a little pan, and that's how they do their grading. So that shouldn't be an issue to be climbing on the
Well,
cooler to grade
and
the milk.
I was one of the DFO representative that went through this, and I agree with you. And that's what they do. They take an extra sample, they grade the milk with the sample first, and then it goes on the truck. But even transporters and processors thought that this was not the same than grading it on top of the bulk tank, and so that's the reason that there's more responsibility. That's where we ended up with. So that's the considerations of putting a silo. Most of the truck is being filled with producers with silos. They have such a large volume that some of them fill the whole truck. So this is not as much an issue as it sounds. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that question. Not seeing any others, I'd like to thank both Emily and Guy for your time today, both preparing the presentation and materials that you shared with us and presenting it. So thank you again for joining, and thank you for joining us for this another series in the Dairy Modernization Initiative. Check out the website there, dairymodernization.ca, as for more of those resources from other webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today.